An 11-year-old girl who sold wildflowers on the shoulder of Route 42 found a leather briefcase full of cash on a Tuesday afternoon in October, and she stood in the rain holding it for a long time before she made the choice that changed everything. The money inside was enough to pay her grandmother's medical bills 6 times over. Nobody was watching. She had every reason in the world to walk the other direction. Instead, she tucked the briefcase under her arm and carried it 3 miles to the police station. That decision, made by a child with wet sneakers and an empty stomach, pulled the thread on a fraud that had been running quietly inside one of Cincinnati's most respected companies for nearly 3 years. The rain that October came in waves, not the romantic kind that patters gently on glass, but the kind that soaks through a jacket in under a minute, that turns the highway shoulder into a shallow river of brown water and dead leaves. Opal Dunn knew every inch of that shoulder. She walked it every afternoon, dragging a battered red wagon behind her, its wheels catching in every rut and crack. She was 11 years old and small for her age, with dark eyes that watched everything, and a particular way of going still when things got hard. In her wagon sat bundles of wildflowers gathered from the field behind her grandmother's house. Clover, goldenrod, the last stubborn black-eyed Susans of the season. On good days she sold enough for groceries. On bad days she sold nothing, and walked home smelling like rain and the faint sweetness of flowers that had given up, waiting to be bought. Her grandmother, May Dunn, had been on dialysis for 14 months. 3 mornings a week, May sat in a recliner at the treatment center on Vine Street, while a machine did the quiet, necessary work her kidneys no longer could. She never complained about it. She always had something warm ready when Opal got home from school, even on the days her hands shook so badly she could barely lift the pot. But Opal had learned to read the tightness around May's eyes the way other kids read weather. She knew what it meant when the pill bottles got low. She knew what it meant when May skipped her own dinner and said she just wasn't hungry tonight, sweetheart. Don't fuss. The prescription slip on the kitchen counter was a number Opal had memorized like a song she hadn't chosen to learn. $840, every 30 days, and that was only one of them. She wasn't supposed to know how bad things were, but she did. She'd found the past due notices in the mail and smoothed them flat before May could see her looking. She'd overheard the phone call from the clinic, the careful voice on the other end, talking about adjusted payment plans. She'd seen the envelope from the bank, the one May had pushed to the bottom of the kitchen drawer without opening. So Opal gathered flowers and stood at the side of the road and smiled at every car that slowed. She was on her way home that Tuesday when she saw it. It sat at the base of the old bus shelter near the Brookside overpass, pushed against the concrete bench, half in shadow, a leather briefcase, dark brown, clean, the kind that belonged on a conference table rather than at the edge of a highway. Its clasp was shut. It was completely dry. Someone had left it there before the rain started. Opal stopped. She looked left and right. A truck passed, spraying water. The shelter was empty. She told herself she'd just check for a name inside, an address, something to tell her who it belonged to. The clasp gave with a sound like a small breath. The money was stacked in neat, even rows, rubber-banded, tight and thick. More cash than Opal had ever seen in one place, more than she could have imagined in May's house, in her school, in any room she had ever stood in. She went completely still. Rain hammered the metal roof above her. Her mind did what minds do in moments like that. It was fast and honest, and almost unbearable. It showed her the pill bottles on the counter. It showed her May at the dialysis center with her eyes closed and her face the color of ash. It showed her the inside of the refrigerator, the number on the prescription slip, the envelope May had pushed to the bottom of the drawer without opening. There was so much more than $840 sitting in this briefcase. Opal's hands trembled. She closed the lid, opened it again, closed it. She sat down on the concrete bench in the rain and pressed her palms against her eyes hard enough to see white. She thought about what would happen if she walked in May's door with this money. May would know immediately that something was wrong. May always knew. And then Opal thought about the other side, about whoever had packed those bills, whoever had set this case down. Somewhere right now, someone was retracing their steps, patting their coat pocket, feeling the specific cold panic of something essential that was suddenly no longer there. She thought about dinner tonight, about school tomorrow, about 5 years from now. "May always says found money buries you," Opal said aloud. Her voice sounded small and strange in the empty shelter. May had told her that once, years ago, when Opal had found a 20 on the sidewalk and been dizzy with the luck of it. "Found money buries you, dear one. Not because it's cursed. Because you spend the rest of your life wondering who needed it more than you did." Opal looked at the briefcase for a long time. Then she stood up, wrapped both arms around it, and started walking. The police station was 2.4 miles away. She had memorized it years ago when May made her memorize it, back when Opal was 7 and May was teaching her what to do in an emergency. Opal hadn't imagined needing it like this. The briefcase was heavy. Her wagon was too small to hold it, so she carried it against her chest with both arms, the empty wagon rattling behind her on a loop of cord tied to her wrist. The rain soaked through her jacket, then her shirt, then her skin. Her sneakers filled with water somewhere around the half-mile mark. She stopped once under a gas station awning to catch her breath and noticed a man in a gray car watching her from the lot, engine running, wipers going. She tightened her grip on the case and kept walking. She didn't look back. By the time the lights of the station came into view, her arms were shaking so badly she could barely hold on. She crossed the parking lot, pushed through the glass door with her shoulder, and stood dripping on the tile floor. The desk officer, his name badge read Kemp, looked up from his computer. Opal set the briefcase on the counter with both hands. Her arms fell to her sides like dead weight. "I found this," she said. Her voice was steadier than she expected. "At the Brookside shelter, I didn't take anything." Kemp leaned forward. He looked at the case. He looked at Opal, her soaked jacket, her muddy shoes, the particular expression on her face of someone who has done something that cost them something real. He opened the clasp. The room went quiet. "Sweetheart," Kemp said slowly, "how long were you walking?" "About an hour," Opal said, "maybe a little more." He closed the briefcase with the care of someone handling something fragile. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "You did the right thing." His voice was quiet when he said it, and something about the way he meant it made Opal's eyes sting. She sat in a plastic chair with a cup of hot chocolate while Kemp made calls in low, measured tones. Within 20 minutes, 2 other officers had come in. Someone mentioned a name. Someone pulled up something on a screen, and their posture changed in the particular way. Posture changes when the stakes go up without warning. The briefcase had been called in that afternoon. Not by an ordinary person. The call had come from Crane Medical Supply, one of the largest medical equipment distributors in the tri-state area. The founder and CEO, a man named Russell Crane, had reported a missing item from the company's private finance wing. The cash inside the briefcase was unregistered. The serial range didn't match anything in Crane Medical's official accounts. Kemp made another call. Then he sat down across from Opal and asked, very gently, if she was hungry. Russell Crane was 56 years old and had spent 30 years building his company from a warehouse on the east side of the city into something that employed 400 people and supplied hospitals across 4 states. He was precise, demanding, and completely without patience for anything that compromised his books. He arrived at the station in under 30 minutes, tie loosened, coat dark from the rain. He saw the briefcase on Kemp's desk from across the room. He saw the child in the plastic chair. He walked over and crouched down to her level without being asked. "You brought this in," he said. Opal looked at him steadily. "Yes." "From the Brookside shelter?" "Yes." "You walked all the way here." "I wanted it to stop being my problem," Opal said. Then she looked away like she hadn't meant to say it like that. Russell Crane, who had not cried in front of another person in a very long time, looked at the wall. He didn't go back to his office that night. He asked Kemp for the address on Opal's file, got it, and drove to a white clapboard house off Fairfax. Small and clean, with peeling paint on the porch railing and a potted plant by the door that someone had been trying very hard to keep alive. May Dunn opened the door, wrapped in a cardigan, and in the 2 seconds before she spotted Russell, her face showed everything: the exhaustion, the worry, The specific look of someone who has been holding something heavy for so long they've forgotten what it felt like to put it down. Russell introduced himself. He said he was sorry to show up unannounced. He asked if he could come in. He sat in May's kitchen and looked at the prescription bottles on the counter without making it obvious he was looking. He took in the worn chair seats, the curtains washed too many times, the grocery list on the refrigerator, written in a child's careful handwriting. He thought about the walk Opal had made through the rain, both arms wrapped around money that could have changed every single thing in this house. He drove home and sat at his desk for a long time. Then he started pulling records. The briefcase had been logged internally as a temporary transfer, no authorization signature from him, no destination account, just a line item in the subsidiary ledger under a vendor he didn't recognize, CW Holdings LLC. He typed the name into the state business registry. Craig Weston had incorporated CW Holdings 18 months ago. Craig Weston, who had been Crane Medical's CFO for 9 years, who had been the best man at Russell's daughter's wedding, who called Russell brother at company dinners and said it like he meant something warm by it. Russell stared at the screen without blinking. He pulled 6 more months of records. The pattern was there once you knew what you were looking for. Vendor invoices inflated past any reasonable market rate, payments flowing to companies with no verifiable address, cash drawn against operating accounts, moved through CW Holdings, gone. A slow, patient bleed that had been running long enough to almost disappear into the background noise of a large company. The briefcase wasn't lost, it was in transit, to a place it was never supposed to go. Russell made a call he'd hoped he'd never need to make. A contact at the Federal Financial Crimes Division, a name he'd kept in his phone for years as a precaution. They talked for 43 minutes. 8 days after Opal walked through the rain, Craig Weston came to her school. He didn't go to the building. He waited in a car across the street and watched the kids come out at 3:15. When Opal appeared at the side door, he called her name with the easy confidence of someone who had never once doubted that people would respond to him. Opal stopped. She didn't recognize the man, but she recognized the tone, too casual, too practiced, the sound of someone trying to seem like they belonged somewhere they didn't. She kept walking. He followed at a careful distance, keeping his voice pleasant, telling her she'd done something remarkable. That he worked with the man who owned the briefcase. That there was a reward being arranged, and he just needed to ask her a few questions. Who else had been at the shelter that day? Whether she'd spoken to anyone before going to the police, whether anyone else had touched the case. Opal turned around and looked at him. She was 11 and small, and her sneakers were still a little stiff from the rain last week. "I don't talk to strangers," she said. Craig smiled like he was used to that answer. "It's only a few questions." "I know," Opal said. "I still don't." She turned back around, walked to the corner, and got into May's car with the engine already running. She waited until they were 2 blocks away before she said anything. Then she told May everything, calmly, in order. May called the number on Officer Kemp's card before they reached the next traffic light. The federal investigator handling the case was a woman named Agent Flores. She had been quietly mapping CW Holdings' account history for 6 days and had already identified Craig Weston as her primary subject before his approach to Opal. But the approach accelerated everything. "He went to her school," Russell said, when Flores briefed him in her office. Flores looked at him levelly. "We're moving faster now." She was methodical and unsentimental, and exactly as good at her job as her reputation suggested. She placed agents outside May's house without announcement. She helped Russell draft a message to Craig that read like a tired man choosing convenience over truth. Careful wording, the right kind of resignation. A man who had decided the easiest path and the right path were the same path. Craig responded within 90 minutes, warm and relieved, and barely able to conceal how much relief he was feeling. He didn't know every word was being logged. The meeting happened in a conference room at Crane Medical, 9 days after Opal's walk. Craig arrived smiling, with coffee and a prepared document. He set it on the table with the calm authority of someone who had done this many times and expected to keep doing it. The document would formalize the transfers, make them official retroactively, close every door Russell might otherwise open. Russell looked at it. He looked at Craig. "You want me to sign," Russell said. Craig spread his hands. "It puts this behind us. You've already decided to move past this. This just makes it official." Russell picked up the pen. Craig exhaled slowly, the exhale of a man whose body had been holding something tight for days and had finally been allowed to let go. Russell signed. In the hallway outside, Agent Flores watched the confirmation signal appear on her screen. The document Craig had prepared was already photographed and indexed. The marked serial numbers from the briefcase matched 3 separate entries in CW Holdings' transaction history. The signature Russell had just provided was documented cooperation, not complicity. The door opened 3 minutes later. Craig was still holding his coffee cup. He looked at Russell, and the smile didn't break immediately. It faded, slowly, the way a light fades when the power is cut, something present and then, suddenly, not. "You said you were letting it go," Craig said. Russell stood with his hands still at his sides. "I was going to," he said, "until a child walked 3 miles through the rain to return your money because she didn't believe it was hers to keep." Craig stared at him. "She's 11 years old," Russell said. "She makes less in a week than you spent on that coffee maker in your office." The agents moved forward, and the room became something different entirely. Spring comes to Cincinnati sideways and uncertain, warm one morning, raw the next, the trees cautious about believing it. May Dunn's kitchen smelled the way it always had, coffee and the particular warmth of a house that has been kept by someone who cares about keeping it. May moved through it carefully now, slowly, but she moved through it. The treatment schedule had been restructured around her comfort. A fund established quietly by Russell, no press release, no cameras, covered her treatments without limit. May had told him she wouldn't accept charity. He'd told her it wasn't charity, it was a debt, and they'd argued about it for 20 minutes, and then she'd cried, and then she'd accepted. Opal was at the kitchen table, doing homework on a Saturday morning when Russell knocked. He had a habit of stopping by on weekends. He brought things sometimes, groceries, once a pair of rain boots in Opal's size that fit perfectly, though she'd never told him her size and he'd never explained how he knew. He never made a production of any of it. He just set things down and asked about May's week and made coffee and stayed an hour, and gradually it had become something none of them needed to explain. "You still have it," he said, looking past Opal to the windowsill. There, in a small glass of water that someone changed every few days, was a single dried flower. A black-eyed Susan, its petals brown and brittle now, curled at the edges, but still holding its shape. "It was in my jacket pocket," Opal said. "The afternoon I found the briefcase. I was going to give it to May when I got home." A pause. "I forgot about it until later, when I found it in my pocket." Russell looked at the flower for a moment. "Why do you keep it?" he asked. "It's dried out." Opal thought about it the way she thought about most things, without rushing, turning it over until she found the honest answers. "Because I almost didn't go," she said quietly. "I sat in that shelter for a long time. I really almost just walked home." She looked at the flower. "I like having something that reminds me that I didn't." Russell nodded slowly. He didn't say anything else for a while, because some things don't need more words than that, and he had learned over these past months that Opal already understood most of the important ones. Through the kitchen window, May was coming up the porch steps with a bag of groceries, moving slow and steady, pausing at the top to look at the magnolia tree that had just begun to bloom. She tilted her face upward just slightly, like she was checking whether the warmth was real. It was. Opal watched her grandmother for a moment, then turned back to her homework. The flower stayed where it was. Did this story stay with you? Leave a rating in the comments, and if it moved you, a like and a subscribe to Gentle Heart means more stories like this one every single week.